Okay, everybody, I think we're ready to begin. If you can all take a chair or a part of the floor and do me a favor and disconnect from the network for about an hour. It's a great pleasure to welcome back to the school a friend and colleague, Ben Van Berkel. 2 years ago in 1999, Ben and Caroline began a 3-volume collection of books titled Move with the following sentence, which is that Move was about redefining organizational structures at all levels. And going on in that sentence to argue that organizational structures are no longer homogeneous linear structures, but active fields of materialization. And the 3 volumes of book that follows that sentence are really an attempt to document not just the work of an office, but a remarkably sustained effort to work through the idea of organization and organizational structures at the end of the 20th century. Ben brings to this task of redefining organizations a deeply infrastructural sensibility to questions of space and architectural practice, which is distinguishing of our time, I think, in a contemporary architectural discourse. Along with that, I think Ben brings a conviction to urbanism as a genuine and vital project, which is distinguishing for a generation of young architects today. I think Ben, as much as any young architect working today and teaching today, believes in the possibility of planning at a time in which planning itself has almost died out as a kind of discipline. In addition to notions like deep planning, which Ben has used to talk about projects like the Arnhem Central Station, which he's been working on for the last 5 years, and entries like the CCA project in New York a couple of years ago, and a AA Diploma Unit the last few years, which is titled the Urban Studio, provides a remarkable body of work for arguing the legitimacy of urbanism and not just architectural space or projects as a kind of practice. As you all know, Ben is a graduate of the AA. In 1987, he graduated from the diploma school with honors, and a year later, with Caroline Bos, established an office in Amsterdam. And 10 years after that, formed a new office titled UN Studio, United Nets, which isn't just an architectural office, but as they argue, a multidisciplinary approach to all kinds of questions of planning, design, graphic design, coordination, and management, in which design is just embedded in a field of many different specialists, all of which happen to be working in not just the coolest office in Amsterdam, but what would probably also be called the coolest club space in the Netherlands today. Fantastic 2-story space full of designers of all kinds. Move was published in 1999, documenting the recent work of the office. A year before that, Ben and Caroline edited a special issue of NA magazine titled Diagram Work, which became an instant classic and compilation of all kinds of contemporary architectural discourse. They have together and individually taught at schools around the world, including the AA, and currently visiting critics at Princeton University. And last year, Ben was appointed the Dean of the Architecture section at the Städelschule in Frankfurt. It's a pleasure to welcome Ben Van Berkel.
Thanks. Is it possible to dim the light a little bit? I just said to Jenny Lowe, who was actually my former tutor, as Moysen here at the AA, I said it is a little bit strange to lecture at home, because I'm here already coming along here for 15 years. And always, when I'm around, especially after lecture, I have the feeling that my mother is in the room. So it's that kind of feeling. I don't know if I explain it right, but it's not the most full, comfortable feeling you would like to have when you give a lecture. Lecture is also going to be a bit experimental. It's a combination of a few lectures I gave over the last 4 years, and the title, as you have maybe seen, is called The Blue Period. It's maybe not the right title yet, but I'm working on it. It's related to a set of publications, but also an exhibition we have to prepare for the NIE in Rotterdam, and it's going to travel. So I'm trying to review my work from the last 12 years, what I've not done yet. everything went really interestingly fast. Talking about the blue period, we joke sometimes in the office and say, if Andy Warhol had a shoe period, why could architects not have a blue period? So why can we not work along periods when we change and think about our changes and directions in the way how we operate? Another aspect of this lecture is related to the way how we'd like to review our topics, and I will do that also today. I'm not going to go deeply into all the projects because then I would have to need a few nights. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about our interest, our topics and our themes where we have been working with. So, for instance, the rethinking of organizational structures, as was mentioned by Brad, the working with new techniques, but really maybe emphasizing a little bit on the aspect of what the technique really does, because I think sometimes we lose ourselves in the technique. And other aspects were interest related to how we could develop certain contemporary effects related to these notions of the working with these new techniques. Maybe let's start with the first slide. As already mentioned, UN Studio is quite a young company. I'm not running it alone. I'm running it together with Caroline Bos. Also, Tobias Walliser, Harm Wassing are now partners in the office. We have a group of incredible young designers right now in the studio, from Igor Cable, Astrid Pieber, Olga Vasquez. They're all designers and slowly will also become independent architects within the company. And I would like to emphasize that I'm probably in 2 years, 3 years time not going to be anymore the only author of the company, but was also always the vision of UN Studio. Another thing is that UN Studio is promoting this aspect of working with specialists, not only our own specialists, but also with the specialists of the clients. And we invite the most diverse professionals in our studio, from fashion designers, fashion predictors, wayfinders, infrastructural managers, and they collaborate with us from a very early stage on in the project. So we often engineer the project within a group of people. Another reason why we set it up, the UN Studio, was simply because we said to ourselves that we thought that architects were becoming real boring in the way how they worked and how they organized themselves. In the sense that especially when we had from Berkel Bos, we often in the mornings talked to the lawyers, in the afternoon did only management work and did the design work in the evenings and in the weekends. Now with this, call it maybe a better infrastructure, where the communications plays an incredible important role, we discover that we have much more freedom for the content of the work. So this is the reason why we set it up specifically, the UN Studio. The key concept is that we want to be linked and be connected. And if you really want to visit the studio, you might not find anyone there. Sometimes I'm sitting with my own mountain in another place, or others might be in New York or in Spain, where we work, and work among the groups in different places. And the next day we might be all together back into the studio. This is the latest project we just finished. It's for a laboratorium in Utrecht. It's called the NMR laboratorium. They do nuclear molecular research. And this building is one of the, you could say for us, the first projects where we started to work with this idea of wrapping a volume or a service around the different identities of the way how the members work in this building. So the laboratoriums are in a particular way connected so that you could move easily from one space to the next space. So there are all kinds of cross links and that's related to the experiments they do. There is not much time they can have between, let's say, the movement from these different spaces in the building. The offices and the sleeping rooms, because they experiment 24 hours in this building, are all connected to this articulation of this service. And as we did with this building, was to work along the different spectrum meters. You see them configured on the left side here, so that we started to articulate the different organizational aspect of the service in such a way that it could start to articulate its volume towards all these aspects where the service could be guided with. And maybe with the discussion we had maybe also this afternoon, I'd like to emphasize that the service is incorporating a lot of architectural ingredients. So the service directs you, it orients, it captures the program, it picks up the construction to make column-free spaces. It is actually also made in order to define the possible links between infrastructural connections between the different parts of the building, as I mentioned. So again, here, not a sketch or the development from a representational technique, let's say from an idea going towards a form, but an instrumental technique started to articulate the finding of this form. And again here, not only particularly my specialists were there on the table, but the people from the laboratorium with their whole knowledge about how these spectrum meters had to be placed in the building, who do have a particular radiation where you cannot walk through, were with us on this research, what we did. These are the people working in the building. These are some of the pictures of the interior, where you see that the service is actually holding up some of the interior elements like lights and some of the cables and the mechanical systems, but all related to very thin connections, like the interior walls are done, so that it can always change over time. So that was the task, to make this huge, not workable, but according to possible changes over time. And what was mentioned by Brett, this time when we were working on this project, it is now, when we started on the design, is maybe around 7 years old. We started to bringing these diagrams, and you have to understand that my belief in the working with diagrams is totally different than maybe some of the other architects, and there have been a lot of architects working with the notion of the diagram, but what I would like to clarify is that we believe very much that the diagram is not related to any kind of linguistic tool. It is an instrumental tool. It is proliferating. It's not like Gropius would work with a diagram, for instance, or promote a diagram introducing any reductive possibility. It is other kind of abstraction what we wanted to introduce with a diagram, and often we collected diagrams. I have maybe around thousands of diagrams right now, where we simply introduced these diagrams in a design process, where it gave us an idea of, in this case, a durational principle of how this starfish moves itself over and rolls itself towards another organization. So by that we started to use these principles in the way how we worked with, for instance, the notion of the surface. So as I said, I mean, these diagrams were for us generative, they were evolutionary, they introduce a kind of expansion of possibilities. Well, this is one of the first projects, maybe you could call, of our period, in the sense that it is one of the first projects where we started to work with these contemporary techniques. The bridge in Rotterdam was one of the earlier projects where we worked with a 3D modeling system in 1991, where we didn't even have, at that time, as you know, a 3D studio, but we developed our own coordination system with the different points and gave them to the engineers. and a contractor. And we discovered in that time that the working with new techniques stimulated the production field. For instance, in this case, or materials directly given to the contractor, who did an incredible good job and did the project much quicker than the other bidders in the process, simply because he had a laser cutter to cut all the steelwork with for this project. Well, that is not the most important of this project. The most important is that it is linking this north and south axis in Rotterdam. It is almost a kind of public construction in the city. I do believe that the project could never be built in another city, in the sense that it refers very much to the robustness of, you could call, of the harbor, the history of the city itself. I mean, as you know, Den Haag is having a totally different history than Amsterdam, and Rotterdam is having that kind of industrial, fantastic history. What it also does is that it connects a certain kind of complexity around the site, in the sense that it maybe became over time, and I could not really foresee that, a kind of complex icon for the city itself. And this aspect of a project you do, what becomes this kind of physical public construction, you could say, but in the same time could become maybe also a virtual public construction, and then generating these kind of cultural and political effects, is one of the things you, of course, always aim for when you do these projects, on particularly these size. This was a really interesting moment when the contractor who did this fantastic laser cutting job, but also had a secret of this crane, where he was very dubious about, because he only set it up the last 3 weeks before the crane came, that he had somewhere a crane in the Chinese Sea, which would lift up this vertical part of the pylon on its horizontal feet. And you can imagine when the people of Rotterdam were here, and there were really around 30,000 people watching this event, and you have to imagine the sizes. This is 140 meters high, so this crane is almost 200 meters high. Much more people liked, of course, the crane than my bridge. And you can specifically see that here. And maybe you can see maybe the references also to the cranes and the organizational principles of, and that actually I discovered it almost unconsciously later when I saw the pylon be linked with the crane itself. Another aspect where I didn't yet talked about is this what we have been working on over the last few years, is material effects of how can you attract certain aspects of visual, formal, organizational aspects towards a material. So, for instance, I mean, in this reference of the balloons of Jeff Koons, what I really liked, what is so shiny in the material, what looks so soft, but if you come closer to it, then you discover that it is steel. And so this triggering aspect of a material what incorporates movement, or it starts to seduce you to think otherwise, is what I really like in some of the work I've been seeing over the last years, and particularly also Jeff Koons' work, who really works very much with the doubleness of material effects. This is a project what's on the way. It's almost finished. It's for an electricity station in Innsbruck. It's, in my opinion, working with that effect, in the sense that if you see it from a distance, the material is almost brown, grey, but if you come close, it's really bluish basalt. And as we search for the material, and particularly the context of the location, it's you know, in a situation where yeah, you have to imagine where Innsbruck is almost a kind of sugar cube soft city with mountains around it who are so permanent and dominant in the surroundings, where we wanted to refer to. So the materials taken from that context and that monstrous quality of the surroundings, and be taken to this site. Another reference is that this frozen energy, what you can find in the material. As you know, basalt lava is a kind of frozen energy, and it really gives that kind of fantastic porous effect if you come closer to the material. Anyway, you have to see the building in comparison with some of the colorful and lightness of the surroundings. This is really a black monster, black-blue monster in the city. And if you come in the building becomes much more softer and translucent, and plays with the effect of the light coming from the outside. The minimal, I always think that I talk about too much, but this is for us another extremely important image and a piece of work from David Lee. We really thought was one of the most inventive and shocking phases I've seen since maybe the work of Bacon, in the sense that it really incorporates that aspect of an organization that is continuous. So it's a mixture between a man, a snake, and a lion, but you can't see the seams, you cannot see where the information comes from. And this aspect of a seamless organization and allowing the difference to be part of the continuous aspect of this organization was really having my interest. So it's the abstraction of it, the organization of it, what was my fascination. Another aspect is, of course, the phase itself and the whole condition of how we can start to understand this aspect of faciality and the notion of an abstract machine behind it. Maybe here the face is like an event without explanation. The face is significant, you could say, but contains nothing to explain, nothing to interpret it. The black hole, white wall system of facial here depends on the abstract machines without any single substance of expression. So what we call the deterritorialization of the body produces a re-territorialization of the face. And maybe, as we know, in modernism we always played with this idea of the different facades. But here the face can be abstracted and be turn itself to an organization that could have a direction of openings and holes in many directions. So it's not this classical notion anymore of the fragmented organization where you still see the seams, but it is this displaced organization of connected parts that have been developed. But this seamless organization is talking about disconnecting the seamless aspects of this organization into one whole. And in this aspect of, let's say, continuous organizations maybe who turn themselves back onto themselves, maybe that is what is for us, or interest in these images and these readings of the things we find, is that we are at the same time interested in the way how these organizations could be used. So, as I mentioned, what is then the construction of the physical versus the let's say the virtual construction, or of how people might use these organizations? Would it be possible that you start to think of stretching certain utility systems, whereby maybe certain spaces could be related to the intensive use of communicating with each other, or let's say wasting each other's time, or move quickly from one space to the other space? So this aspect of the public construction was another layer we brought into our project. So I'd like to now go more further in some of the projects we have been doing related to these topics I mentioned. For instance, the Möbius House was actually a project where we started to say, and actually was a question also from the client, of how can we simply hang around in a landscape of 4 quadrants, and how could we move from one side to the landscape of the house to another side of the landscape of the house. So how could we deal with these 4 quadrants of the landscape? And you have to imagine this is his working space, what is also his own living space, and this is her working space and living space. And then you have the general living space on the lower part, and then a sleeping room for parents and sleeping room for the children upstairs. So it really is an organization that turned itself back onto itself, but related to the way how it almost works as a clock in time, and occupies these different programmatic possibilities, where in one service you have all these ingredients of working and sleeping, allowing all these different to be related to small furniture, a staircase, and the service who directs you and orients you towards these different aspects of a continuity into one structure. Not alone introduced this idea of the, let's say, the continuous service for its programmatic directionality and incorporating time, but another aspect was this principle of the way how we worked with the construction. So the construction is almost a kind of aid-like organization, whereby we could make this quite unusual large of 8 meters cantilever over this lower part of the landscape. You see the client being really happy with the house, and he's suggesting that he's working. But you see that they use the house in many different ways. It is not a house what provides a particular possibility of using only one room, and then you have to move to the next room. The service and the furniture are allowing you really to use the house in many different ways. For instance, this table is used in the morning for the breakfast, but often in the afternoon when the two owners who work at home also have often their meetings at this working table. I mean, what is the most important aspect of incorporating these aspects of all these architectural ingredients? I would like to emphasize. We still use in these topics of the organizations we work with, like, I mean, we work with geometry, with material effects, with the light, and the way how you bring the glass from the outside turning to the inside, and the concrete what turns from the outside to the inside. We are after, of course, a particular kind of spatial effect, and in this case, and you have again to visit for that reason the house, but it is really full of kaleidoscopic effects. You cannot really put a perspective or the movement of a perspective into one direction. You always have these reflections and double cuts in the house where you see the differential qualities of there where you move around, specifically where you have in this part the movements coming from the high part down to the lower part of the house. We try to incorporate all these intensities in this kaleidoscopic effect. And lately, in some last housing projects, we have been similarly working with these ideas, and these are real projects who are on the go, whereby this aspect of working at home, where you have a private space, a business space where you can work, and you can invite your colleagues or your client to your home, where you have a communal space for the family, a communal space for the public, in the sense here in this space we allowed in this project a space where you have a server, where you have a pickup place and hubs place for food who can be picked up. So all these integrational programmatic changes are incorporated in this in the structure of this housing project, with the mutation of slow programs, public programs you could say, and private programs into one organization. And here you see some of the experiments we are doing, whereby we study of how, let's say, the transition between certain walls could be allowing all these different spaces to be separated sometimes, but at the same time be one whenever you would like to have this one big space. I'd like to now focus on a series of projects who are related to or use of as we call deep planning, planning in time. And in this diagram you see how in a project in Manhattan we tested on the location next to the west side of the Penn Station how different user groups and simply working here also with the city. I mean, we really try to incorporate all the data into the system. How the different user groups are using the city in time, not only during the day, but in the week, on the location. And simply here, we believe that it was important to understand not only the user groups, but the way how the infrastructure operated, where certain congestions were started to appear, and what it was doing to the existing site-specific qualities of the location. This was another diagram we worked with, whereby we started to think of how certain aspects of the program, like this is the city user versus the residential user, could start to combine certain programs with the kind of interest and the movement on the location, grouped into one cluster. So I mean, and the diagram is set it up as almost, you could call it a 7-dimensional system. So you have accessibility on this side here, publicness on this side here, time in a vertical sense, and we started to see how, let's say, from 3 to 5 minutes you could move from one program to the other program, and then in the same time looking where in this cluster structure, on the lower part you could simply waste your time and hang around a public space underneath this cluster system. So, and in the same time started to think of how the city operates. I do believe that if we think about planning and planning strategies, that whole mechanical organization of using, producing and consuming could start to be rethought in its organizational principle. And as you know, Manhattan was particularly built along a very strong mechanical system. From the edges of Manhattan you had the piers where all the goods came in, and then you had this production site on the edge of Manhattan, then the consuming area somewhere in the middle, and high finance at the central part of Manhattan itself. But it was all mechanically stacked, not only in its plan organization, but also in its vertical organization. But anyway, this aspect, this working method, this kind of strategy of clustering information was tested in some of our later work. This is a project we did for a location in Genoa. I don't know if you know the city. It's a kind of amazing dense city, sandwiched between the mountains and the harbor, and with an incredible cut of a highway between, let's say, the harbor and the city. The connection between the city and the harbor is actually not fully working, and for that reason we tried in this almost three-dimensional square like site, I'll explain it later, we tried to connect the different activities and piers with this bridge, so that it could start to generate a more circular active linking towards the whole site. You see that model, this is our site, it's called the Ponte Brody. Here an aquarium with almost 1.5 million people coming to this site. You have a terminal on this side here, or a site is having also a terminal, but it's not having 2.5 million people coming to the terminal on this site. We have 1 million people coming to the site. So an enormous amount of public forces related to this part of the harbor, but not linked to the city. And our belief was that if we could start with a new subway and a better connection towards the city, we could start not only with our project, but with the linking of the other projects, start to incorporate a better kind of cross-virtualization of movement towards the city center, but it's actually not fully operating on this side here. A second aspect of the project were these program finders, as we call them, abstract devices whereby if you would enter the square, this three-dimensional square from the city, you would have in the morning and the afternoon and the evening different possibilities of different programmatic events. But if you would enter it, you would have on the edge quick program, so edge programs, and then in the middle you would have volume program, pockets of program, and on the roof you would have what we call the service program. We look not only at the day, but also at the climate, so what it could do over the year when certain squares could be made active, specifically in the, for instance, in the summer. And then what we did was to look at the different programmatic activities for these user groups, but maybe concentrated them more towards that linking aspect of the city, as I mentioned, and study the 24-hour possibilities of differential distributions of programs related to these three layers of the edge programs, volume programs, and the service program on the roof. Here you see that how we then that developed the pocketing and the making more volumetric aspect of the organization of this grid, where we stretched the grid so that we would open up these different diamonds in this structure of the grid and allow certain volumes, like the three pocket programs, in the three corners of the site. The most important is that we opened it up not simply because of, let's say, the twisting or the transformative aspect of the geometry alone, but to allow daylight to come down in this part, and also that you would move easily from the car park up to this square and then move towards the also towards the roof through these diamond-like spaces. And then what we did to allow it to work towards a three-dimensional, almost four-dimensional with program and events landscape, and started to test how, let's say, these volumes would work towards the rules of the angles who would guide you through the service. And maybe what came up also in the discussion today with the Graduate Design School is testing more or less also how the different oblique surfaces could start to trigger a particular kind of movement towards program, so that the surface of the square could be incorporated in the way how the surface could start to guide you, so that the surface brings you to a particular part of the site of the square, so that wayfinding and organizational aspects and orienting you towards a particular attractor is incorporated in the surface itself. You see the plan with these openings. When you would enter from this side here, where you can then park, there is another entrance for buses, taxis, related to the, on this side, terminal. Tugboats who are taking these large ocean liners out of the harbor, and then a smaller terminal for smaller boats on this side here. These are these three clusters, as I mentioned, more related to what we call the science experience, the body experience, and the consumer experience. And these three layers are related to the different activities for the morning, the afternoon, and the evening. What is possible on this square is to have other activities like, for instance, this arena, and can listen by the night to music whenever it is possible related to the time of the year. This principle of working with the mixing of programs being related to time, have been really having our interest not so much towards planning in time, but the way how it could start to trigger different volumes. This is a project, a small project we did for a client who's called, was having a firm that is called Skin.com. Skin.com is an organization that promotes different products with email numbers on bags, on cloth, so that if you recognize someone and you'd like to communicate with the person, you could start to email him. And maybe you can generate a particular kind of community. And this idea of this company was to have little shops who turn into a lounge, but also a communication center over the time and during the day, with different aspects of a net cafe, information which you can get, or for a travel agency, etc. And would promote the idea of that when it would work in an odd location, they were not interested in the very high profile locations, then would generate them over these shops and lounges over different places in Europe, and then later on to the rest of the world. These were then plugins, elements who would then change and be connected to some of these places and shops related to particular constraints. Yeah, and then maybe allowing a different reading in the way how they can be used, in the sense that, for instance, this furniture is there to be used for the lounge area. You can sit on it with 3 persons, but if you turn it, you can sit on it and take on your shoes. So it's a multi-generative aspect and a proliferating aspect of the furniture we work with. Then I'd like to go into a project where I would focus on a little bit more. It's almost embarrassing to talk about it sometimes, I think, because we have been working on this project for now 5 years, and I'm sure that it will take another 5 years to finish the project. And at the same time, how repetitive it might be that I talk about the project, and for you a bit usual and boring to see it again. It is for me almost becoming a part of my life to work on this project, and I really like to stress that there is so much work in process to be seen, that I hope that you still find some new elements to reflect on. As I mentioned in the deep planning strategy, we believed lately that it was important to not work so much with time alone, but also how time and structures of program could start to incorporate information of organizations who allow much more freedom. And in that sense, I believe that architects, in the way how they work, not only in the way how they operate in the studio, but in the way how they communicate with different levels, with politicians and maybe not only user groups, but their specialists. We think that it is important to bring the network information very carefully together, so that you start to learn to proportion information, that you start to play with the aspect of information, that it starts to allow you to articulate an organization of a shape, of a form, to be going from a box to a blob. So you could have a unit system, you could have a hard system what is unit-based, organized, like an office, but you could allow also it to be part of an infrastructure. So the infrastructure system could be part of the box system and back again. And this aspect, this later development of the work, gives us the belief that we should liberate any kind of stylistic interest we have been working with before. We think it doesn't matter anymore if you work with a box or a softer system. You could mix the two and allow far more freedom if you know how to play with information. And don't forget, it needs to sound right. Another aspect of this working with different layers of information is that then how to work with material treatment, as I mentioned before. For instance, in the Arnhem project, what I will show you now, the Arnhem Central Station area, we just finished a little tunnel. It's not a very large project, but it's a small entrance towards the car park. We worked with the idea that you slowly would move out of a dark space and then gradually through the screen, through this mesh of steel, you would slowly move into the daylight, almost like coming out of a bad dream, moving towards towards the daylight. Yeah, and then the material is treated in many directions, so not only going through over this hole, but also going towards the edge of the surface of this tunnel. And I should have never said that it was this dream to a journalist, because he wrote very actually beautifully the next day about the 3 seconds of beauty. when you would move through this tunnel. And what's really interesting in this city, in the city of Arnhem, is that whenever you do something, the whole, almost, not the whole city, but a lot of people always watch what you are doing. So around 20,000 people visited this tunnel when we started this large scale project. These were some of the testings and studies of the way how we worked with the colors in the tunnel. The way how then this hole, this opening would work versus the closing off of the tunnel. And as you know, the city is going to be connected to the high-speed line from going from Lille to Rotterdam, Amsterdam, Utrecht, Arnhem, and then Germany. And our belief is that Arnhem, with having the Randstad here and the Ruhrgebiet, the German Ruhrgebiet, what is an incredible economical force, Arnhem would be an interesting new network city in the relationship with all these other cities in the region of Europe. So, I mean, as we know with the project we did for a museum in Nijmegen, what is just down here, much more visitors from Germany visit the location than, let's say, the Dutch. So this region is already a very mixed circulation space for the use of many people coming to this location. This is the site. It's around 40,000 square meters. This is the program of almost 160,000 meter needed to go onto this site. This is promoted by the government actually to really emphasize working with these locations throughout station areas because their belief is that it will support public transport and they give not only from the government but also from the European government a lot of money to support these projects, to work on these projects. And fantastically enough, they really support this idea of intensive use of ground, where you have to understand in Holland, and I think it's going on right now in a lot of other places, the use of density related to, let's say, the protection of the landscape is an incredible struggle we have to deal with. But my belief is not only to work with the notion of density alone, but to find ways how dense moments and principles of infrastructure and program and use could start to incorporate a system that allows itself so that it could start to shift easily from one aspect to the program towards the other aspect of the program, so that you invent a new connecting organizational system than we have done until now. Before we used to work simply with column systems and worked with a parking organization that was, for instance, having one code and then having the officers on top who have another code and then not knowing where to put what in the middle. I will come to this later. The site is this, a transfer location with a train, a regional bus, and trolley bus and local bus, a bicycle parking for almost 5,000 bikes and a car park underneath the whole site for around 1,000 cars. Now, the interesting thing is that the movement around this whole station is for 75% all concentrated within the station itself. So 25% is only moving outside the location of the transfer location itself. So that means that we had to put this outside square in the middle of the different systems. This is the entrance of the train, the regional bus, the local bus, and place the square in the middle so that we could make the transfer movement more accessible from different directions. What is another aspect of the location is that there is a slope. So we try to work with the slope so that coming from the, let's say, the higher part of the location and the train, for instance, you would always directly move easily and slowly down towards all these entities you would see on this transfer location. So we made two cuts in the landscape and allowed through these two cuts to combine all the systems in one landscape. And that gave us a lot of possibilities to have an open structure, to see always where you would have to go to. And I come to that later. This is how you move. You come from the central station, the two bus stations, an entrance to it's a car park. There is a square for the offices on top. The public square on front of the transfer hall, and this square in the middle is covered by a major roof. I will explain you also later. Then what we did was to look at, you have to see here in blue is all the infrastructure, and the infrastructure is as much in density as you can see in red the program. But what we did is to look at slow program in the middle, quick program in the middle where there would be a lot of movement, and slow program more on the edges of the location and on the higher parts of the location. So here, for instance, we could introduce, run shopping and all the things would be related to quick shopping, or places where you could do quick things, and then here you could live and work. This is the development of the project. You see here how, let's say, the infrastructure of the project works. These are the waiting areas. If you come from the train station for the regional bus, these are large-scale constructive V's going through the whole site who carry all the layers of the whole project. Explain it later. And here are the waiting areas for the other bus station on this side here. What we did was really to look at how, in a column-free space, we would always have views towards the entities on different levels, and the possibility, whenever you would wait, of an expansion of movement and waiting areas, whenever there would be congestion on the different sides of the location. So whenever the bus would not come, you would always have the possibility to let this space grow. Yeah, this is the entrance towards the bicycle parking, entrance towards the car park. This is the direction towards the city. This is a drop-off place for the buses, who then move slowly into this place, and then you can wait in this side here. This is the principle of the way how the cross-section operates. Car park, the landscape, the transfer place, the offices on top, and the V's are connecting the three systems. So here you have the V's who are more or less, yeah, you could say, I can move to the screen, sorry. I'd like to explain that here you have, let's say, a system, but is a set of columns sandwiched to one system. So this is bringing all the columns to one organization with a span of almost 25 meters. So we opened up the V's so that daylight could come in, and the V systems grow towards car park, the bus station, and the offices on top. So it mixes all these different code systems and organizational systems you have to work with in one system, in one organizational engineering constructive system. And it allows in this different set of grids to be, as I said, the construction, the circulation space for the car park, but also for the people moving up from the V's up to the bus station and the offices. Brings the light down deep into, you could say, almost this building-like lobby of the site. It's the fire escape, and it's also bringing the air down for circulation in the three layers of the integral building. Also, mechanical aspects are incorporated again also in this system. This is the V with the testings of views and materials where the light comes down and how the stages and the elevators operate in the system. You see it here much better, how these V's are connected to the three parts of the building. And here the V's under construction. This is the car park almost finished. What you see is that in the slopes of the plan of this car park, because it's sloping very carefully down, you cannot see the end of the perspectives, what generates incredible strains of effects. The same for what you can see in the way how you view down from a bridge, what brings you from one part of the car park to the other part. And you cross this with your car this car park. You cross also the V and then can look up and see the daylight coming down, and you can see these people moving from, in a diagonal way, from the lower part of the car park up to the transfer hall. You see here also how, let's say, this staircase hangs into this V and crisscrosses from one layer to the next layer and then to the top layer. And explains maybe how, let's say, the project operates. I mean, this is the complexity and the diversity of the way how we need to operate. We have the building phasing, we have the design phasing, you could say. We have all the different. We have around 8 clients to work on this project, so I mean it's an unbelievable network of layers we need to incorporate in the system. And as I always mentioned, since I do this project, I believe that we have to really rethink the whole concept of who the architect is. I mean, before we, specifically on our side of let's say the history of working within our office, we have discovered that still in Europe we have the belief that sometimes we need to be the Baumeister and being the architect who gives and sells the project to the client. And if you don't buy it, then I'm out. That's often the strategy. But we discovered here that you need to be more kind of public scientist to incorporate all these complex systems in order to relate them to each other and to make one whole out of them. And need to learn to work with the big details in a project. This is the way how we mapped, and this was quite early already in 1996, how, let's say, different volumes of density could move from one side to the other. So this is the station, the bus station, the regional bus station, and how, let's say, all these volumes could start to meander and start to articulate a particular volume for the space where they could be incorporated in. This was one of the diagrams we believed in to play with in order to understand the movement of this set of people not going so much out of the location. So again, an organization that turns itself back onto itself. So it's a volumetric Möbius belt, you could say, whereby the service moves from the outside towards the inside and turns itself back to itself. So, and it carries itself also. That is a very interesting thing of this mathematical model, that the system is carrying itself. And literally this was done in this organization in the way how the V's then bring you up and the service is moved towards the roof and then goes towards the transfer hall and moves back again towards this higher office square and then goes in again. So it is a movement of volume, of public movement, of public virtual movement, you could say, and public physical movement what supports each other. Whereas on the office side, you have more unit-based organization, so more kind of hard system. Whereas on the transfer hall, you have a far more softer system, what is more related to the infrastructural diversity and flexibility you can move in. Maybe you see that much better here. So the harder system, the unit-based system versus the infrastructural organization of this middle part of the location. Again, here the local bus, the regional bus is underneath here, the entrance of the train station and the link towards the city. I'm almost finished, so I'll give you another 5 or 10 minutes. This is the further development on the research on the roof, where the roof is tested in the relationship with a central element what carries the span of almost 40 meters on this side and 25 meters on this side, where you see a structural model of there where the forces go to on the side of the surface. So it's really a testing model where we ping-pong with the engineers from over Arab, where, for instance, Charles Walker and Cecil Belmont played an important role in. And maybe here we tested for the first time how this whole idea of the phase, maybe this whole idea of the black hole, white wall condition could be turned into a three-dimensional condition where, let's say, the eyes are maybe to be found in the higher aspect of the element where the light comes down, or where the eyes are lowly to be found in area where you could go down into the bicycle stand, or where the openings are guiding you and attract you towards different entities of the infrastructural node you have to go to. So this aspect of the phase and the way how you can start to read the phase as maybe a system that is not so singular. And maybe I'd like to also clarify that I'm not supporting the idea that a service project alone can start to become an interesting project when it starts to guide you infrastructurally. I believe also that the service should start to be almost like the phase, having almost like maybe Proust writes about the phase over in one sentence over 2 pages, and saying how the phase is having a musical line in itself, and pictorial line, and conscious line, and passion line, but that it is always changing in time in the way how you read it. And this is what my real belief is, that the service should do. It should really attract you and have different readings, almost in a kaleidoscopic effect of the way how, let's say, it organizes itself. Maybe that is best to be explained in this last part of the project, where this is the system. It's a dome column organization what captures all the forces going down in the V of the transfer hall. So here again you come from the train station and move to the bus station, we said here, but this twisted dome column works almost like, maybe you've done this once in your bath, if you take the bath stop out and all the forces circulate down. This is what literally is happening in this system. So all the forces go around the edges of this dome column system, and what it does is that it not only incorporates the construction, but it also guides you and directs you when you come from the station towards the bus station, but it goes also, it directs you towards the lower part of the station, and it brings down that aspect of light. So it guides, it twists, and it works as a torus, and almost as a kaleidoscopic organizational effect towards the spaces around it. That's what I'd like to really emphasize again, that it is not only the object itself, it's the way how the kaleidoscopic effects around it are twisting it and guiding it in many directions. I'd like to finish by saying that Blue is, as I said, an experimental title, and it's not about, you know, it's not about the blue. It's about feeling free to experiment, to invent, and to be unself-conscious about your fascinations. It's about being vivid, maybe intense, maybe sometimes a perfectionist where it is possible, daring, and not being afraid for failure. Thanks very much.
Can you do a couple questions?
Yeah.
Microphone from Joel. Joel, can you have the microphone?
Do we have questions in the audience? I know it's something we talked about briefly at lunch, and looking again at the work and the way you present it, I'm wondering if you might, you're at the kind of stage with both these projects and a career that combines buildings, urbanism, and other kinds of designs to maybe evaluate to a degree the question of time and the role it's played in these projects. I think as architects we know buildings take time, careers take time. You describe the projects at moments as if time is an essential ingredient to it. The way you described Arnhem, in which certain decisions are delayed for a later stage in the project to allow local conditions to develop. And I'm wondering, having taken the projects to this point, if you might have something to say about perhaps the kind of techniques you guys might be developing in the studio to evaluate those decisions, or if it's related to the way these networks of clients and authorities work with you in the studio to develop those later stages in projects?
Yes. Well, what you don't learn as an art, I'd never learned it, is to manage these complex network systems you have to deal with specifically in an R&M project. So we, maybe as we do in the organization of the office itself, maybe, and I have to say the other way around. I mean, I've learned from managing these projects how you need to organize your office in a way that, let's say, the infrastructure of the way how you communicate needs to be extremely sufficient. Like I said, it is sometimes so that you, before we thought that the design-facing strategy is the normal way of developing a wonderful process with your specialist, and then come to the finding of a design. But now I discovered that it is actually it is the politician who and the money givers. It is the voting system in the city who's taking part in that whole management network of how you need to incorporate different phasing strategies of how you design a project like this. So it is again so that you cannot work as an architect today in a dialectical manner anymore. I mean, you cannot really say, you know, there is the client and here I am, and you have to give me money and then I do the project. It's impossible with these kind of complex questions you work with, and maybe I've been lucky or maybe unhappy to get a lot of these kind of intensive use of ground location, because Genoa is a similar kind of location. But at the same time, I find them extremely fascinating because they give you through the questionnaire the allowance to maybe invent, to possibly invent. I mean, if you would have a far more simpler question, then it is sometimes it's more difficult to be experimental because you know the rules. Here, the external aspect of the unpredicted rules gave us maybe the possibility to be unpredicted, but you have to develop you could say, a new form of concept of control. I mean, you have to control the system in a new way. You cannot simply through a singular management strategy work with it. It is more relational, as I said. You have to work in a relational, organizational way. One way is what we do is with our specialists, for instance, that we talk more about